concerned, I'm going to mark it as Exhibit 1. So, is there anything else you wanted to say about your petition? All right. So now what happens is we ask board members if they have any questions of you, okay? Mr. Barron, why don't we start with you tonight? Have any questions of our petitioner?
No, I've visited the site, and I see what is intended, and I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nicanello, any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, everything looks good. Thank you so much.
Wow. This may be the quickest meeting we're ever going to hold. I bet I'm going to get questions for you right over here. Mr. Igo, any questions of our petitioner?
None, it's pretty self-explanatory to me.
This is a first. Mr. Martin.
I don't have any questions, comments maybe, but no questions at this point.
Well, happy Valentine's Day to all. So, I'm not going to break the spell. I'm going to say I have no questions. It appears pretty straightforward. We do have some correspondence, one of which you just passed up to us. It's a letter dated 2/14/19 from Jessica Blake, who indicates that you're her neighbor, and you showed her the elevations for your desired extension of his garage area and an actual farmer's porch on the front of his home at the above referenced address. The plans look well considered and moderate, as well as providing some interesting architectural change to the facade and much-needed workshop space. While my mother, I can read. While my mother, Lorraine Doyle, who I believe has already emailed in her support for granting the variance or special request, is the owner of the property, I have recently moved back to the neighborhood and personally looked at the plans proposed. I fully support the intentions and expectations of Jim's request and hope that you grant him this relief. We have a letter dated 2/10/19 from Mr. Stephen M. Kenny, who very nicely and succinctly writes, I have no problem with Mr. James W. Baker Jr. improving and enhancing our neighborhood, as many others have in the area due to the small sizes of our homes. Linda Cipro of 68 Beacon Street writes on February 11 that I am a direct abutter to Jim Baker at 62 Beacon Street. I have no objection to the proposed garage and farmer's porch. I believe that the project will be a nice addition to his home and an enhancement to the neighborhood. Did you tell them what to write?
I did not.
All right. So we do have some comment from the Board of Health. And the Board of Health says, the Health Department file indicates an existing 1996 Title V septic system located to the rear of the dwelling. The proposed garage and porch additions meet the minimum setbacks to the existing septic system and will not impact its function or capacity. Full review of the proposed project by the Board of Health will be required prior to final approval. And you understand they have to weigh in as well, right? Mm-hmm. Oh. So now, having read all the correspondence, does anyone in our audience care to speak in favor of this petition? If so, please come to the lectern and the microphone there. And seeing none, does anybody in our audience care to speak in opposition to this petition? If so, please come to the microphone at the lectern and tell us all about it. And seeing none, we now close it to the public's commentary on the petition and input. We open it up to board discussions, deliberations. Mr. Martin, your thoughts?
I think it's a good addition. I think it looks nice. These are smaller, older lots. The houses, when they were built, were subject to 6-foot sideline setback, so I don't really have a problem with a sideline setback for the garage. A little bit more of a problem on the farmer's porch in the front, although which looks like the original setback didn't even meet the setback requirements. So that's getting up closer to 25, but it's just a farmer's porch, and it's going to make the house look prettier, so I think I can live with that.
Very good. Mr. Igo, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Dick on this. I think it's going to make the house look a lot nicer. You know, it's a very tastefully done addition, what he proposes here. I don't have a problem with the sideline setback. Again, it was 6 feet. Now they changed it. It's in an R40 zoning district now, so these houses, it's very tough to meet these setbacks, especially on the sides. I think he certainly meets the criteria under the bylaw, so I can certainly support this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And you'd support it as?
A special permit, alteration, alter and extend.
Mr. Nicanello.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing, no comments. Congratulations, thanks for investing in Yarmouth.
Thank you.
And how about you there, Mr. Barron?
I really don't have any objection. The setbacks are a little under the required, but I think the proposed work is going to be an enhancement to the neighborhood.
Well, I know how I feel about front yard setbacks, and I think I'd love to always be consistent in it, but I also know Beacon Street, and I know these are very small lots, and the fact that each and every one of the people that weighed in on this as concerned abutters or interested parties all spoke to the same thing that I agree with with all the other members of the board, which is that this will create an architectural enhancement of this farmer's porch, which otherwise might not have been had we required you to stay with no addition into that front setback. I'm always very, very hesitant to grant it, but in this circumstance, I think the uniqueness of the size of this property, it's a small lot of 12,600 feet. More importantly, the garage would look so just inappropriate if it didn't have this connection to the home the way you've designed it, and I think you've done a wonderful job. Does anybody care to make a motion?
I'll move to approve petition number 4788 as requested for a special permit under zoning bylaw 104.3.2/2,
And that's without conditions?
without any conditions.
And is there a second to that?
Second.
And who did that, please?
Mr. Barron.
Mr. Barron. So on that motion made by Mr. Martin, seconded by Mr. Barron, to approve the petition as it relates to the grant of a special permit, does anybody care to have discussion before moving it along to a vote?
The only thing I would like to add, Mr. Chairman, and I think you brought it to our attention, is it is front setback relief, and I know historically the board has concerns about that, but as you said, it is it's more decorative than it is living space that's encroaching into the front setback, so I think this is a little different than someone asking for relief for habitable space.
All right. Well, I think the only thing I would ask that we consider just adding to it, perhaps as a condition of the approval, is that in addition, our vote include that we would allow the petitioner to withdraw the request for variance, and that would be a request, a withdrawal without prejudice. Would that be all right to
Yeah,
add
I'd
to
like
your
to
motion?
like to make that amendment.
And would that be all right to add to your second?
Yes.
Let me just make a note. I'm not trying to hold you up, but. And you understand that that means that you're going to get the relief, assuming we vote in favor of it, that means you're going to get the relief you're looking for, but as a special permit as opposed to a variance, okay? So on that motion so made with that stated condition, all those in favor of that, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that carries unanimously. 20 days from when this decision is drafted, and that will be as, with a Monday holiday, maybe it will be as pretty quick this week. That means that a decision must be drafted, filed with the town clerk's office. 20 days must elapse before that grant of a special permit is considered as final. That's a technical waiting period. I'm not anticipating anybody appealing from our decision tonight. Once that occurs, you have to bring that special permit to the Barnstable Registry of Deeds and record it. You have to then return proof of recordation back to Ms. Clark, our best Valentine girl right over here. And she will then walk you through all the process, okay? And then you'll be able to go get your building permit and start. Thanks for adding to the county, to the community.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, does he have to withdraw the variance request as well?
Yeah, we did that.
Yes, we did that as a,
All right.
yeah, that was the condition, yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Barron. and I'd be amiss not to know today's date by heart, and that's the 19th. No pun intended when I said Hart, I want you to know. We used to have a board member named Hart, remember that? Yeah. Moved up north. Yeah. All right, so this is now petition 4790, that of Robert and Doreen Moran. It's concerning property located at, in an R25 zoning district at 10 Signet Road in West Yarmouth. Our applicant this evening is seeking a special permit under zoning bylaw 104.3.2 and/or a variance for under zoning bylaw 203.5 to construct deck and steps on a pre-existing non-conforming structure encroaching into the rear and side setbacks. Good evening.
Good evening.
And would you tell us who you are, please?
I would certainly. I'm attorney Leslie Ann Morris, and I represent Robert and Doreen Moran, who have owned this property for not quite 19 years.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Please go ahead and tell us about your petition.
Okay. If you thought the other lots you were dealing with and the last one was small, the lots in this subdivision are 5,000 square feet.
Yep.
I have a copy of the old subdivision plan if anyone would like to see it. They are tiny.
You know, I think we're all aware of this subdivision, so
It's one of those,
I don't think we need it. No more plans.
All right. Well, the two lots, 286 and 287, were sold simultaneously in the 1970s and to an Agnes Trask, I believe, and they constructed 2 cottages, but paid no attention to lot lines. The neighbor on our left is literally, the house sits on the lot line. You could not walk around that house without walking onto 10 Signet. And in fact, that resulted in litigation, which was only resolved about a year ago when my clients bought 8 Signet to end the litigation. 10 Signet, as stated, they have owned for quite a while. When they were purchasing it, they discovered that the house sat over a lot line. They sat over the lot line partially into 285. As a result, they purchased, about 1,500 square feet. So they now have 6,500 square feet. But again, a small lot by any estimation. My clients have wanted for some time to change the stairs in the back, which obviously go into the setbacks. And they completely redid, when they bought 8 Signet, they basically took it to the studs and completely redid it. They also decided to do some work on 10, and that included redoing the front stairs, and the back stairs also got done. My clients tell me they were in Europe when those back stairs got done. They had talked about it, but they really didn't expect it to be done before somebody got the necessary permits. You've been out there, you know, it's sitting there. It's already done. I'm not going to defend it. Never defend the indefensible. But it is small. It's about 8 square feet. It makes it much easier to get into and out of the house. This is going to be a retirement home for my clients. And we're here asking that we be granted a special permit, variance. I don't even know if I prayed for a variance, but if necessary, to keep the deck, for a special permit, to keep the small deck with the stairs.
Very good. Mr. Martin, any questions of our petitioner?
No, I guess it's pretty much self-explanatory what's happening here. The deck is built now.
Thank you. I was just trying to...
And as you say, the lot certainly is small. There's not much ability to do anything. It's too bad the house was set so much farther back from the road in the beginning than it needed to be.
I mean, honestly, they paid no attention to where lot lines were.
Kind of
I'm just trying
crazy.
to see why a ramp...
But anyways, I don't have any other questions at this point.
Mr. Igo?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Now, you know, this must be, I know both of your wives are in the southern states. So why are you all trying to get home so early tonight?
We're going home.
Oh, okay.
Going to another state.
Mr. Nicanello, any questions about petitioner this evening?
My wife's here.
Well, it's a lovely deck, yes, and
I thought so.
yeah, and it is probably much warranted for as you retire. It's a very small lot. I can understand how it all conforms. It's a very packed neighborhood. I run by there all the time, and there's really a lot of room, you know.
A lot of fences.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very tight, sardine-like type neighborhood. So the deck was constructed without anybody's knowing, is that what you said?
My clients were in Europe. They
Right,
had hired
okay.
somebody to the front and talked about the back, and they didn't really expect the back to be done when they got back.
Right, okay. Well, you know, communication is always an issue, so. But besides that, no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Barron?
Yes, I have no real problem with the deck. It's a convenience more than an encroachment on the property line. It's in the corner of the lot as well. Other than that, no further questions.
Before I read the correspondence, one of the letters recites to an issue of 2 previous requests for permit. Well, let me just read it. It's a letter of February 14, 19. Janice C. Sullivan, indicating that based on the information provided, I oppose the approval of this appeal. 2 previous requests for permits to build this structure were denied. This was built by the homeowners without a valid permit. It encroaches on 2 sides of the adjacent properties. I understand all that we're here to talk about this evening, but I don't understand this suggestion that 2 previous requests for permits to build the structure were denied. Do you know anything about that?
No.
Because it would seem to suggest that there were 2 applications for a building permit that were denied. And I don't know who the builder was that was working on their home, but they ought to know better than building any kind of structure without the appropriate permit.
I agree totally.
But I'm struck with, you know, the reality that how much smaller could we make a back stoop leading from the height of that back door? Right. You know, I mean, there's got to be something that allows you a turning radius to walk up or down a flight of stairs. But in any event, let me read both of these in. I've read the letter of Ms. Sullivan.
Mr. Chairman, just to note that on the building department's note, he gives the historical history as to the other denials.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Martin. So he indicates historical facts. The building department files reflect that a building permit application was denied by me. This is from Jim Brandolini. Gee, I'm so glad to see that he's still getting a couple of days in every once in a while. On April 18, 2002, on which a 12 by 12 foot rear deck was proposed, something substantially different than what we're looking at. That package included a copy of an assessor's diagram dated July 3, 2000, depicting a rear deck measuring 11 feet and 5 deep. So this is by square footage less than that existing deck, I would think, right? I mean, what do we have here, an 8 by?
It's 8 by 8, I believe.
So 64 square
Right,
feet. That would be 55. I apologize, a little bit bigger. More recently, an October 3, 2018 plot plan depicts the rear of the house to be 20.6 feet from the rear lot line that would have placed the old deck approximately 15.5 plus or minus feet from the rear lot line, where 20 is the minimum required. I'm assuming that old deck was there for quite a while, but in any event, what's the distance that this is going to result in? What does that say off of
I
our
think
plot
it's
plan?
13.5,
13.6, yeah.
0.6, okay.
I'm sorry, 13.6?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, well, then how could a deck of, oh, because it was only 5 feet wide, I got you. On February 13 of 2019, Eric Aron wrote to the board, and he indicates I'm a direct abutting neighbor to 10 Signet Road. He is, I'm not sure of his address, and in contacting you to state my concerns and objections to the recently built rear deck and steps that encroach on my property line. The structures clearly violate the town zoning setback requirements and are constructed without receiving the necessary approvals from the Board of Appeals or a building permit. I'm unable to attend the February 14 Board of Appeals hearing, but want to go on record as objecting to relief being granted due to the extent that the deck violates the setback requirements, encroaches on my property line, and was constructed without permits. Now, I gotta dig that plan out, because I didn't see an encroachment on a
does-
property line. Encroaches in the setbacks.
In the setback, but not on the property line. And it's
Well,
no worse than what was originally there, as far as I can tell.
well, let me just actually go to the plot plan, okay? I mean, to me, it looks 7.3 feet from, well, that's 7.3 from the corner of the building, not from that step that comes down. But let's forget the steps, because I don't think we count those, or do we? We do on the front. Do we on the sides, too? So it'd be something less than 7.3, but it's still certainly off the property line. And I'm not sure how, I'm assuming he was referring to setbacks when he mentioned property line. Does anyone in our audience care to speak in favor of this petition? If so, please come to the microphone at the lectern and let's be heard. And seeing none, does anyone care to speak in opposition to this petition? Seeing none, we now close it to the public's commentary or input into the petition. We open up the board discussions, deliberations. Mr. Barron, your thoughts?
No comment, sir.
Okay, and Mr. Nicanello?
Well, clearly there was some type of communication problem here, and it's a shame that it all happened that way. Had it been communicated properly, and maybe things would have worked out, but there's still an issue there somewhere. So of what happened, I'm just kind of pondering. So that's all I have to say at this moment, Mr. Chairman.
Let's move it down then to Mr. Igo.
What was there a deck there before coming out of that? I don't see anything.
There was some stairs, I think there was a deck prior to that.
Because I'm not seeing it anywhere on any plans or anything from the town. They don't have anything.
Well, according to his, again, thanks to Mr. Martin, he pointed out the historical facts,
Let
and
me take a look at that.
and he's indicating, Mr. Brandolini's indicating more recently, on October 3, 2018 plot plan depicts the rear of the house to be 20.6 feet from the rear lot line. That would have placed the old deck approximately 15 plus or minus feet from the rear line. That was a deck that had been noted on a prior plan that had been 11 feet wide and 5 feet deep.
And we don't have that.
Yeah.
So there was already something coming out 5 feet.
Yeah.
And this one comes out how far?
It may have disappeared.
8.
All right, so you're adding 3 feet onto it. Well, we've got two choices here. We either approve it or we tell them to tear it down. They don't have a building permit. They were denied previously. How long's your client owned this house?
In April, it'll be 19 years. He bought it in 2000. They bought it in
So
2000.
your client was denied the 2002 permit.
I understand that.
And he had no knowledge of this being built?
That's my understanding of it.
That sounds a little hard to believe.
Well, he wasn't here. He was in Europe.
Well, I understand that, but I mean,
I
he
didn't
told
get...
somebody to build a front step on his house, and he came back and he had a brand-new deck
Well,
on the back.
honestly, I mean, we're calling it a deck, but let's be honest, it's more of a landing. I mean, it's not very big. It's 8 by 8. The way the railings are, it really cuts down on the size of it. I mean,
Which used to be 11 by 5, that's our point.
yeah.
But the 11 by 5 was never built.
Right.
Yeah.
So they bought the two lots, so this is really a double lot, is that what it is?
No. What we're talking about is 10 Signet. 10 Signet sits, when they were going to buy it, the house sat over the lot line. So they own all of the original 286 and about a quarter of the original 285. 14 Signet, which is the property owned by the other gentleman, Mr. Arone, owns the rest of 285 and I think 284 and maybe 283.
Can you tell me where his lot, where his house is situated on his abutting lot?
It's situated,
In the middle of the three lots?
yeah,
or-
he's pretty much over on the side. What he's been doing is he put up a Quonset hut, and he was using that property next to my client's as basically a contractor's yard for years, until the building inspector, after they took a look at our property, went looking at his.
And what happened to the Quonset hut?
I think it's still there. I think he may have gotten a building permit for that, but I know there were other stuff he's had to take down. The building inspector's chasing him. But, you know, that's neither here nor there, but obviously.
That would be to the right of this,
Yes.
this property?
Right.
So on the line closest to where we're encroaching,
Yes.
which is I'm looking at the house.
Oh, the Quonset hut, there's a Quonset house, a garage, and then there's a house.
The Quonset hut sits right on his lot sideline there.
Yeah. I think you may even be able to see it in some of these pictures.
Is that the blue roof?
Blue roof, yeah.
I'm still pondering this. Dick, if you have any comments.
Dick, do you have any questions of our petitioner?
Well, I've got some concerns. I don't, never happy when something gets done.
I'm sorry, not questions
I'm
of our petitioner.
yeah.
Do you have any comments on it?
Yeah, I never happy when something gets done and we come after the fact for relief, and especially with two direct abutters having problems with what's been done is a concern to me. I think if the petitioner had looked into that, actually the houses are, as we said, they're small lots, and there's not much thought given to where their houses were placed originally. As a matter of fact, I remember at one time having to instigate the whole re-subdivision of Lake Road East because every house was over the lot line.
I've seen that happen elsewhere.
But I do have some issues. I think some of the houses there have decks in the front because that's the only place they would fit. And people have worked hard to try and make things fit in difficult circumstances, and that's why they might end up with a deck in front, or they don't end up with any deck if it doesn't fit. Actually, with the setback that's here now, this deck could have been built and could possibly still be moved to the front, where it would not need any relief, because the existing house setback from the sideline is 7.3 feet. You wouldn't go any closer than that, and you've got well over your 30 feet front setback, and you could just have a nice landing deck in the front. I'm just mentioning that as a potential option.
I understand, but there's really a porch out there in the front of that.
There's already a porch.
Yeah, and the real idea here is not even so much the deck as access. I mean, as one of my clients put it, even getting a refrigerator into the kitchen, which is, that house is very tiny inside, is, just would have been difficult without at least someplace, a landing or something to move on.
Well, you're always allowed to stoop and steps and so forth from that door. I'm sure those are always existed. At one point, apparently, there was a smaller deck there. But actually, looking at the front on the assessor's picture, there's kind of a porch with a door in the middle, and I think a deck would actually look pretty good off the front of that house. Again, just my suggestion of a way that this could have been done and given them the ability to have a deck, even a bigger deck than this one, and having it meet all zoning bylaws without need for any relief. But with the case at hand, as to what's here right now, I have some issues, especially with the butters concerned about it, and the fact that it was done with apparently knowingly, or by somebody anyways. I can't imagine a builder just building it there without not having talked to the owner first. So I have some issues here.
Okay. Mr. Igo, I know you give it some thought. Did you want to
Well,
say anything else?
Well, this is what I would say, is it appears that there was a previous deck there that was 11 by 5, so that's 55 square feet. This deck, what are the dimensions of this deck?
8 by 8.
8 by 8. that's
64.
All right. Well, I guess the question that I would have here is, this is for the board, is what happens if we say yes to this, and then everybody else decides to not get a permit and start building decks, and then they come in and they say, well, you gave these people permission, why do we need a building permit? I'm not hearing, I'm not,
Yeah, I think that the lack of a building permit, the lack of a building
Preface that.
permit, relief from
Something that
this
was
board
previously
before a
denied.
building permit isn't of the consequential discussion that we need to have. That's a reality. In this petition, I'm incredulous that people go to Europe and leave to someone else the right to, the decision to build wherever they want on their property. I mean, I would imagine they're getting paid for the work they're doing and that costs extra money.
this doesn't look like a
But
cheap deck.
it looks like a very nice deck. They built a
this-
real nice deck, and quite frankly,
And this deck would have required a building permit, and whoever did build it should have gone for a building permit and
That's-
found out that he couldn't do it.
that's correct. That's correct. So whether or not somebody just plain knew they weren't going to be able to get the relief, and now, because somebody contacted Mr. Brandolini, it's now before us, I guess it's speculation, but how, I'm looking at Mr. Aron's property, and believe me, I'm not suggesting for a minute that because someone next door is on the property line, that should decide this issue. Please understand that. But when I'm looking at it next door, that blue roofed building appears to be exactly on the property line. Right next to that white fence. So I mean, I don't have a good view of it, but that's the way it at least appears.
That's true.
What I can't personally, what I couldn't agree to with this is the second set of stairs that goes towards Mr. Aron's property. I don't see the need for them. They're of no utility to this, but they enhance the encroachment. So in my mind, those would have to come off and that rail closed. But even at that, we've increased from 55 square feet of nonconformity to now 64. It's been the backyard that usually doesn't bother us when we see some of this, particularly on a 5,000 square foot yard, when I don't know how you build any structure on it that isn't probably going to be needing of some relief. And just in terms of utility, I mean, if it were my deck, I would take those left stairs off and I would widen that right set of stairs so that you could maybe get up a refrigerator if you needed to. But, it's not my deck. So,
Mr. Chairman, may I just
sure.
highlight the field card? I mean, this letter from Mr. Brandolini was October of 18, and it appears that we had a re-roof building permit pulled in September of 17. So, I mean, the building permit, process does work, and this particular house did have pre-permits for previous work. So this work was not attempted to be permitted. Thank you.
You mean the clear intention was to build it without the benefit of a permit? Is that what you're suggesting?
The evidence shows that the history of the facility has pre-permitted work.
Well, I think everybody knows how to get a building permit in this town. It's pretty simple. You just go down to the office and ask for it.
Who did the work?
I don't know. I'll be
Where's your client right now?
someplace out celebrating Valentine's Day with his wife.
I mean, it might have been a good idea to have the builder or your client here to testify, just to explain how this became a mistake, and if it was actually a real mistake.
As far as I know, it was a mistake.
Well,
I mean, my client,
I'm
it
not
makes...
trying to put it on you, by
I
the way,
understand that.
counsel. I understand you're in a difficult position here.
But the simple fact of the matter is, it would make no sense to not try and do this, because the building inspectors were inspecting 8 Signet. Because my clients did literally, over the summer and well into the fall, took that building to the studs and completely redid it. If we're standing on 8, and you see a brand-new deck, and you're a building inspector, aren't you going to think second or twice about that?
Well, I'm not going to put any harm or foul on the building inspector for not inspecting something that there wasn't a building permit for when they became aware that there was a structure that was built without the benefit of a building permit. Mr. Brandolini and the building department did the absolute right thing. They sent out a violation notice. So, I mean,
Respectfully, I
with all
didn't
due
mean it
respect,
that
I
way.
want to keep the eye on the ball of this deck as opposed to what the building commissioner should or shouldn't have done because he was next door.
Respectfully, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, why would my client instruct somebody to put up a deck if he knew there were going to be building inspectors next door?
I can't explain, but I know he did. I can't explain. Because, I mean, with all fairness, this deck doesn't just come into being. It's not like, I don't care if he was replacing front steps. Nobody goes out. I wish a contractor would come to my home and repair my front steps and then go build me a beautiful deck out back. I wish that would happen. But I don't know any contractors, even my best friends, that are willing to do that at their dime. So they must have got a bill for this deck they
I'm
didn't.
sure they did.
They didn't authorize or know of. And counsel, you are well known to the other lawyers on this board. And we respect your integrity, but I think your clients are filling you with a little bit of misinformation, with respect. But we come back to this structure as what we're trying to deal with tonight. So why don't we just take a little poll of the board instead of bringing it to a vote or asking for a motion? What are your thoughts, Mr. Martin? Could you support it?
I don't think I can support the petition as it's written now, no.
And what if those stairs to the left were removed? Would you still want to see it smaller?
That's better, but I still have issues with it, and I think there were some alternatives that could have been explored here that should have been.
And how about you there, Mr. Igo? What are your thoughts? Could you support this petition this evening?
Well, I will say this, I never, you know, to have them rip it down, I can probably estimate this deck cost in the thousands of dollars. This is not an inexpensive deck that got put on the back. This just isn't, you know, a little landing that got put on. It's got expensive decking on it. I'm looking at the frame. Someone put some time and some effort and some material into this deck. I'm just running through my mind how maybe we can mitigate this in some way. I know you're talking about removing one of the staircases. Certainly would be some mitigation to this. And again, it's really not the size here, because we are only talking, although the deck was removed, I don't know when it was removed, but that's a whole nother issue on itself. It's, you know, Jim Brandolini was referencing a 1988 plan that showed a rear deck. So when you remove a deck, if you don't rebuild it within a certain period of time, you lose the right to rebuild it. So, you know, this is new construction. It's really not an alteration, so it really requires variance relief too, I believe. This is not a special permit. And,
I respectfully disagree.
okay,
It's an extension of a non-conforming use. That's a special permit under Chapter
Well-
48, Section 6.
okay, we can,
Now, if you were creating a completely new encroachment, say on one of the side setbacks, that might require variance. There's some,
is this, let me just look at the rear right here for a second. You complied with the rear before you built this deck, correct?
no.
The house
No.
did?
No, there had to be something there that was an access
There was an access there,
Yeah, there
no.
had to be something there,
To
right?
the-
was
to the
something.
door.
May have been a
So-
stoop of some sort, yeah.
No, yeah, so there must have been, so you're right. Okay, I'd agree it's a special permit. Again, I just, what really troubles me here is, what do we do when the next person comes in who doesn't have a building permit?
Can I weigh in on that very topic? You know, I'm not sure who on this board sat on it, I don't think Mr. Barron did, I doubt that Mr. Nicanello did, but you
I probably
and
did.
I may have. That cottage colony where they built 7 or 8 structures without the benefit of permits. And that came before us.
Yep,
And then they did it a second time.
yep.
And then they came before us, and in each instance, we granted relief.
Well, we took away things from them, though. We did take things away from them, but I agree with you. And that came to mind, by the way, Mr. Chairman.
I absolutely think mea culpa is the worst plea I've heard in a while, not by counsel, but
No.
by her client. But nevertheless, we have this structure. My point of view, I'm going to just tell you, I could support it if we remove that left-hand staircase as I'm looking at the deck, but I'm only one, and if you get one more that isn't going to support it, because I'm not sure Mr. Martin is or is not, but you might want to think about withdrawing it, but that's up to you. Mr. Nicanello?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure what happened 17 years ago when the building permit was denied, but the gentleman sure did have the avenue to come before this board at that time. I know he was proposing a 12 by 12. Board may have suggested half of that. He could have got something, but he chose to pull back. Didn't seek the avenue, which most people do. If they don't get the building permit approved, they come before the board and try to get some relief, or they make another building plan. That sure was evident of that time 17 years ago. And here we are at this point where the deck is on, we've had a permitted roof, the process is known to the owner, and I would not support it.
Very good. So there's 2. Am I right, Mr. Martin? You're not going to support it?
I think that's safe to assume. Yep.
All right, so, we always give petitioners the opportunity to consider. That's why I wanted to poll the board.
I understand.
You're not going to prevail on the vote, even if Mr. Igo, Mr. Barron, and myself vote in favor of it. And so if you would like, we would entertain a motion to withdraw, wouldn't we, without prejudice?
Trouble is, I can't consult my clients.
Well, you
The
know, if
alternative
you
is-
don't, we vote on it, then that means that you're barred from coming back and seeking additional relief for, what is it, 3 years?
2 years.
2 years.
In the alternative, could I ask that it be continued to the next meeting so I can consult with them?
Maybe you want to, I don't think that, sure, you can consult with them, and we're happy to, I want it the same board members if we can, though, if there's an,
What's the next?
I mean, it doesn't have to be the next meeting, obviously.
28th.
June 28th. February
yeah, well, obviously, because the deck is existing. So we can keep it up for another month, I guess.
They're not there that very much this time of year.
You may come back that day, but not early enough.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be the same board, but I mean, I think it's loud and clear that we have Mr. Martin, who I'd love to have be here because to see if he can be persuaded to change his vote, along with Mr. Nicanello, who I'm almost assured is here, because he's here about as often, or maybe more often than I am. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be here.
You can have my chocolates.
Thank you. And Mr. Barron, we haven't heard a word from him yet, but he might be very interested in saying no as well. So, so far, you've only heard one yay, if it was conditional. So,
You want my,
yeah, why don't you
You want my
pine
2
in
cents?
so we can see what Sandy can do to try to get the same board back?
I understand there's history, but I look at the letter from Mr. Brandolini, and there was an attempt in October last year to apply for a building permit. Something slipped along the way that the deck got built, and the permit was never issued. And therefore, it never came before this board. So it's long overdue to come to the board. But that in essence is the only thing that I see is at issue here. The history is nice to know, but it should not be the compelling argument against this. As far as the actual construction, I think it would be an asset to the property and would enhance the property. So my vote would be in favor.
Okay.
Can I ask council a question?
Sure.
Why did they create this plot plan in October of 2018?
Because they, at that point, they were cited by the building inspector, and
So this is in response to the building.
that was in response to the building inspector, that they wanted to know exactly what existed on the ground.
I see. Okay.
And the original plan was to be at your December meeting. However, I got caught up in something else, and you guys were overburdened for your December meeting, so.
We're always overburdened.
Oh, I don't think so. And it's not too bad. The last time I got home, I was part of this board, I got home after midnight.
We won't speak to that. I remember
No.
those days. New faces.
Faces, okay.
Did you have anything else? Or should we move on the request to continue?
Yeah. Just a question, would you anticipate your client being here for the next meeting?
I have no idea. They don't, they live up past the Boston area, so I do not know whether they'll be here. I mean, if we're simply going to withdraw, I'll probably just send a letter in authorizing the withdrawal.
Well, no, you can't just do that, see, because we need to vote on that withdrawal if you want it to be without prejudice. And you'd certainly want it to be without prejudice,
well-
because you might want to come back for a smaller deck,
True, but okay, obviously you do it that way. I've sat on other boards that, somebody sends in a letter, please withdraw without prejudice, we just allow it.
Yeah, well, we always make it a habit of this board to vote on withdrawal without prejudice, so. I mean, we can either do it tonight, or we can do a continuance, however you'd like to do it. If it came back here, I would want to just see some changes made to it, whether or not it's to reduce it down to that 55 square feet somehow, or at least remove those steps before I'm going to have any consideration of it. So that's my...
I mean, that's probably my question. I mean, are you just asking for withdrawal so you can go ask your client if you want to withdraw it or get a vote on it? Is that what it is?
Correct.
Well, I mean, if you withdraw it, then you're subject to $300 a day. I don't think the building department's just gonna let it sit there. So, at least if you get a no vote on it, you have the right of appeal. If you think you're wrong.
Well,
Of course, you might want to go back to your client and suggest that maybe they might want to modify that deck a little bit. Or consider it, modifying it.
And for what it's worth, I could probably see a good argument for and agree to a deck that was replacing what was maybe there at one point before in terms of those dimensions without the stairway to the side.
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be, I don't think it would have to be exactly 11 by 5, but something that came into the 55 square foot size, just so that there's not an increase in nonconformity that we're being asked to consider, because there is an increase in the nonconformity to the rear setback, without
I
doubt.
don't think there's any question, but I still don't think it, comes to the point of being substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, and that's the standard, is whether or not it's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
So maybe you want to take a vote and appeal that decision.
Not without talking to my client, I don't.
Okay.
All right, so there has been a request to continue. Why don't we just,
I'd like to make a motion that we allow the petitioner to continue this matter until the next date.
is there a second?
Is that right?
February 28th,
Pardon me?
February 28th, the next date.
February 28, when was it filed? Do we need an extension or not? It's only 2 weeks away.
I don't think so.
Well, let's just get the filing date. 124. It's just 124 was your filing date.
Yeah.
How'd you get on so quick? Do you get special attention around here?
I don't know, I was just talking to the nice lady.
All right, so 120, we don't even need an extension agreement for that. Yeah, all right, so if it goes beyond, then clearly we'd need an extension agreement, but 2 weeks isn't going to impact it. So Mr. Agers made a motion to continue to 228, 19. Does anybody care to second that motion?
Second.
Does anybody care to second that motion to continue?
Mr. Barron.
Mr. Barron. All right. Now, is that date convenient with you, counsel?
As far as I know.
We don't want to get it continued to that date with, then have to continue it further.
I have nothing on that day.
Thank you very much. So that date would be convenient?
It would be convenient.
All right, on that motion to continue to February 28th, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. We'll see you that evening.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, thank you. I'm going to pass this down so I don't take it home, Emily.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Okay. Next matter on our agenda is that of 4791 Baskins Hardware, Inc., property located, excuse me, at 23 K White's Path, South Yarmouth, Mass. That property is in a zoning district B1, and it's also in the Aquifer Protection District. Our applicant seeks a special permit under zoning bylaw 406.5 to increase quantity of toxic and hazardous materials in the APD. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Why don't
Happy
you tell us all
Valentine's Day.
about it and who you are first, okay?
Hi. I'm Lynn Colangione. I'm one of the owners of Baskins Hardware. We're a Cape Cod family-owned business. We've been in business over 40 years. We've been in the Yarmouth site for about 28 years now, and we're excited about expanding into the unit next to us. And our hope is to be able to carry more paints and to open a bigger paint department within that unit, which would require getting permission from the board to expand the amount of toxic and hazardous materials that we carry. We'd be looking to increase the amount of paints and stains by about 1,500 gallons. And as the Board of Health has looked at the issue, they've recommended that we be allowed, in order to accommodate that, a total of 5,000 gallons max of toxic and hazardous materials in our unit. And as a retail business, we're pretty much just resell. The product comes in, we resell. We don't do anything with it, with the exception of paints, which we open up and put a tint in if somebody wants it colored, and close it, and it goes out the door. Most of all the paints right now, that almost the majority of them are all, they've moved into water-based paint instead of oil-based paint, and they're VOC-free. So it's, this is the only department, the only types of products we'd be looking to expand in terms of our toxic and hazardous materials. And Mr. Lawson of the Board of Health walked us through that process. And so we're here asking for permission for that.
You know, thank you so much for being so succinct. I'm sure everybody on the board has read the very thoughtful report of Mr. Lawson and his recommendations as to how to proceed. And in the past, we've had these matters come before us, and we've always only, our own really concern was that of what the Board of Health had to weigh in on. I mean, this is a good business that's been here, as you say, for many years, and a welcome neighbor in this town. I don't know that we need a lot of discussion on this tonight, do we? Let me just say to you, I want to thank your firm for being willing to expand in the town of Yarmouth and now take on a higher tax obligation and give more sales tax in for the state. We're very appreciative of that here. Does anybody care to have any questions of this petitioner this evening?
I just had one question.
Sure, of course.
The limit of 5,000 gallons, and I know we talked 5,000 gallons, but essentially what we're talking about, it's stored in a can, so you'd have a number of cans that would come up to, and what are those, 1-gallon cans?
The majority's 1 gallon,
1
and
gallon.
much smaller amount would be 5 gallon.
Right.
That would be the max for like a contractor grade.
Exactly. So when we're talking about 5,000 gallons here, we're talking about numerous amounts of individually stored paint cans. So it's really not,
Right.
if one were to rupture, you might spill a gallon of paint.
That's right, that's right.
And as you indicated, these are all water-based paints. I'm not even quite sure that they would affect the aquifer
Right.
if they were to even leak in mass into the system, because it washes away. I mean,
Jeez, I remember spilling a bucket of paint. It took forever to get rid of it. I got it on my grass.
probably what
Took a long
Oil-based
time to get
paints,
rid of it.
oil-based
Lot of
paints
water.
for- Yeah.
You gotta get the,
yeah.
you gotta get the turpentine out. But that's really what it is, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, and I don't know, that was just a comment that what I would suggest to the board if we were to approve it, and I would recommend that we do, is just adopt the Board of Health recommendations that are at the back of the memo that they sent us, and just put those as conditions, which is normally what we do when we see something that comes in, and it's in the APD. Because the Board of Health is very good to give us direction, and we look to them for direction, because they're the experts here. I know it is a zoning issue, but when we're talking about public health, we certainly look to them for their expertise. And they very nicely, and they always have, they lay this out for us, so they give us good direction. It's very easy for us to follow. So that's what my recommendation would be, is we just follow theirs and incorporate that into any decision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think, I'm going to echo your sentiment. I think Mr. Lawson does just a fabulous job in detailing out the Board of Health concerns and the conditions that they would want to see us place on it. And kudos to him and to the Board of Health. Does anybody have any questions of our petitioner? I just want to say that we have, to those people sitting at home that might not be able to see all of the chairs that sit behind this petitioner, that there is one person sitting in those chairs, so we know that no one is here to speak in favor. And I know he's working on the next petition, so there's nobody here to speak in favor or against this, and I just don't want anybody at home to think we're overlooking that. So that being said, there being no correspondence, there being no new exhibits, is anybody prepared to make a motion on this petition that would incorporate exactly what Mr. Igo said, which is that we would condition the grant of this petition upon the 8 recommendations set forth in the zoning board, in the Carly Lawson Jr. February 1, 2019 overview, and make those a condition by reference.
So moved.
Mr. Barron moved,
Second.
and Mr. Martin second. And does anybody on our board care to have discussion?
Mr. Chairman, what I would like to say is I wish you all the best of luck, and you sell a lot of paint. Maybe you can take some of the other vacant stores and sell some brushes and tape. So, good luck.
Yes, thank you, I appreciate that.
The only thing I would say.
If that's for me, you could answer it for me, okay? So,
Subject to all the Board of Health.
I'm sorry?
Subject to all the Board of Health
Sure,
requests and
sure,
suggestions.
sure.
And that they do meet the criteria under the bylaw.
Yeah, I think as it relates to our overview of the APD concerns, they certainly do meet the requirements here. Once again, I'm going to just pontificate for a minute and say that this may be something that doesn't necessarily need our review in each instance, but I think other people on this board have differing points of view on it. So all those in favor of that motion made by Mr. Maron, seconded by Mr. Martin, on the stated conditions, please, if you're in favor of that, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, that carries unanimously. What's going to happen is a decision will be drafted in due course, hopefully very quickly. That decision will be needed to be on file with the town clerk's office for 20 days before it's considered final. You would then take that grant of special permit to the Barnstable Registry of Deeds, record it, return proof of recordation back to our board, and thank you very much tonight.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh,
You
thanks.
too.
So
Yeah.
glad you were all here. I was afraid, what if we don't get a quorum? If people
We-
suddenly realize it's Valentine's Day.
Where were you at Christmas time, you know? See ya. Thank you. All right, our last petition this evening is that of College Highway LLC, doing business as Five Star Transportation. This petition is concerning property located at 9 Commonwealth Ave and 0 White's Path, South Yarmouth, Mass. That property being in a B3 and Aquifer Protection District, B3 zoning district and an APD or Aquifer Protection District. This evening, our applicant is seeking a special permit under 301.4.6 and Use Table 202.5, Section 5(3) for relief from in-lot tree requirement for a proposed bus transportation facility. Good evening. Would you identify for us who you are and tell us all about your petition?
Yes, sir. Good evening. Good evening. For the record, I'm Rob Levesque from R. Levesque Associates, here this evening representing Five Star Bus. They are the proponents and the owners of the subject property. We're here this evening after we've gone through the site plan review process with the town, and I have communicated back and forth with the town departments. I believe Mr. Martin was at the site plan review committee meeting, and we've basically whittled down to one item, which is the in-lot trees. We've requested some additional relief earlier on, and we've basically got it down to that one item. So on the site plan that you see to my left, White's Path is to the north, and to the east we have the side street with the vet hospital there is directly across the street. The subject property has an existing building on it that is...
Could I just interrupt you for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me, please, since my glasses on, what sheet is this on the plans that we have?
Yes, sir. This is actually a presentation sheet, which happens to be a hybrid, but I think the easiest would be probably sheet C.
C7.
C7. Thank you.
C7? Okay, well, we're going to be reading it off of C7, not the presentation, that's
Thank you.
why. All right, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem, thank you. So there's an existing building, and basically what they're doing is they have two areas within the subject property. The front area, which we'll call the front of house, or the public area where the employees would park. The back of the house, or the area, the asphalt area that you see to the south, where the building is, that's basically an enclosed storage yard for the buses. So this is a transportation facility. The school-age children take buses that are provided by these folks. So the back area is, again, storage for buses. We have two curb cuts that we're proposing. One where they come in the back, and then they would circle in a counterclockwise motion around that back site, and then they would exit just north of the building there. So again, the building's existing. Some improvements need to be made to the backyard. It was kind of a rough piece of property. They're in the process of cleaning it up. This would be the final phase to clean up and landscape and pave and do all this work to clean up this site. That said, if I can bring my microphone over.
Thank you for being attendant to that. We're so appreciative.
Thank you. So on the plan here,
You
you'll
can
see-
pick it up if you'd like.
Thank you. That's better, thank you. So on the plan, these areas are in-lot trees. The surrounding perimeter landscape doesn't count as in-lot trees. In this particular site, the function of this back area is really a storage area, really not a parking area, so to speak. So it's the storage of the buses after they deliver the kids all day. So with that, our focus was basically to give in-lot trees in the front. We're a little tight with what they need from a functional point of view as far as the parking. So what we did is we threw a number of trees in here, which, according to your building inspector, don't quite meet the regulations as far as the letter of the law, but we were hoping that that would be satisfactory. the goal, I think, in the end is to try to make it look as good from the streets. Obviously, in between the two parking lots is really just going to be the owner who's really going to be seeing that. This additional row of trees here we thought was helpful. The inlet trees are here. So again, we don't meet the letter of the requirement. We're requesting relief from the requirement for inlet trees. Tried to make an effort through the site planning process to at least adopt all of the other comments that were made. I think we did a pretty good job of that. And this is the last item. So we would respectfully request relief from the requirement for in-lot trees. And I have the section, if you'd like it. I think it's 301.46.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, let's see. Mr. Barron, any questions of our petitioner?
I was on site yesterday visiting, and obviously the site needs help. After our huge snowstorm the other night, it's a mud bowl back there. So the idea of the improvements that are projected do make sense. But we're here to talk about the in-lot trees, and I think the overall landscape plan is well thought out, and I hope it is carried out that way, and if so, it will be an enhancement. My only concern is the fact that the entire drainage will be to the south. There is a retention area, and then that has a spillway into town-owned property, and that is addressed in the notes for the project. That recharge capability is a critical one, where now it's muddy and it's recharging throughout the entire area. You're now concentrating all that recharge into a much smaller area. It's got to be done. It's got to be carefully designed and built and maintained. The one difficulty I've seen, for example, with Mass DOT, with retention areas that are built alongside state highways, that they build them and then they forget them, and that is, I think, one of the key elements that has to be carefully watched here. And that retention area is also going to be a garden of itself in its own right, and therefore that should carry the care of maintenance of that as a paramount operating criteria. Other than that, I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barron. Mr. Nicanello.
Yes, thank you and good evening, and thanks for all your hard work. There's a lot to go on. It's a very busy site. I go up Commonwealth Avenue quite a bit. The other day I had to drive on the left side of the road because all the buses were on the right side of the road and flashing lights, and so it was probably that time of the day. It doesn't last that long, but I understand there's a certain time of day that it gets to be very busy there, morning and then late in the afternoon. Whatever you do is definitely an improvement to what was there. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, if you're going to, as Mr. Barron said, do some water mitigation, I'd probably bring that water right back around to the trees to keep them seeded, because you want those to grow at least higher than the buses so you don't see them, which you see a lot of the buses. When the yard is everybody gone at the end of the day, it's quite full.
Yeah.
It's extremely full, and I was kind of surprised that they chose that, but that's what they did. So, but besides that, I'm all set with it.
I'm just going to throw mine in instead of going down the usual way. The 4 trees are being eliminated, and 8 trees are being added? Is that what I'm saying?
I believe there's more than 8. There's 4 being added in the islands in front. There's also some supplemental planting.
No, I'm
that-
talking within the paved surface,
Okay, there's...
within the parking lot.
Yeah, within the parking, there's 4 being added. Yes, sir.
A total of 4 being added, 4 being removed, 8 being added.
Correct.
Okay, so that area to the north of the 8 trees that are intended to be added, why is that paved? Is that paved for employee parking?
Yeah, the area to the north, sir?
Yes.
That is correct, yes. So that would be the parking for folks that are driving the buses.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no other questions. Mr. Igo?
What type of trees are you proposing between the employee parking and the bus parking area?
I believe they're pin oak. Pin oak?
You know?
Yeah, I believe so.
Now, what type of a tree is that? Is that going to provide a buffer?
Deciduous tree. It's not, so it's not an evergreen.
Not an evergreen?
No, no, sir. Those could be substituted if that was,
I mean, personally, I think it would look a lot nicer to have a nice evergreen there that acted as a natural fence that could separate the visual of the buses there from White's Path. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how the other board members feel about that, but I think that would certainly dress it up.
Nothing like looking at a tree without leaves, is there?
Yeah, you know, it looks good for 3 months of the year or whatever it is, and that's if it blooms well, but I think if we could get something like an evergreen that bushes up vertically, and have a row of those there that will eventually grow out to create a natural fence that you can't see through. That's what I would prefer to see there.
I would probably, if they were arborvitae or something like that, I would probably increase the number a little bit just to make sure that we could get the proper screen. But I think that would be more appropriate.
I'd like to see Leland cypress or something like that.
Sure,
Fast-growing.
absolutely.
Is that the evergreen?
That's a thick evergreen, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's a high one, too, isn't it?
Yeah.
nice choice.
Yeah.
So would you be amenable to putting those in?
Absolutely. I
Probably
have,
cheaper.
you know what, in the end, it might be
I mean, less expensive.
less expensive.
I didn't mean cheap.
Now, you're here just to seek relief from the trees? Everything else you
That's correct.
don't have any, you don't need any relief for?
That's correct. Through the process, we eliminated a lot of the other relief items we would have needed. In addition, to these gentlemen's point, we have submitted a stormwater application to the engineering department. They've reviewed it. That was all based on the DEP stormwater management standards that came out in 2008, meeting all those requirements for water quality. Again, initially we were thinking of, they wanted to do gravel on the lot, and that was discussed, and they're willing to pave it, which I think is a positive, obviously, being over the aquifer from a water quality standpoint, spill prevention, those types of things. So,
It's going to be paved?
yes, sir.
Okay.
So
And
you
are there
said,
any changes to the building? There's not going to be any type of?
I believe there was some discussion at the site plan review about the look of the building and the concern over the look of the building and the color. I think they had agreed, I'm pretty sure they had agreed to paint it. I don't know if that's been done. To be honest with you, I'm from Western Mass and haven't seen it recently. But my understanding is that they plan on painting it a more palatable color than, I believe it was blue last time I was there.
Yeah, just don't do neon yellow, will you? Neon green, right, will you?
Neon blue right now.
Exactly.
Banana yellow.
Faded.
It is.
I know Dr. Wheels was there.
In the end, they actually, my client actually liked a lot of the suggestions that were made through the site planning process. So it's a good process, and I think they were a little reluctant at first, and you probably saw that in the initial plan, but they've come around.
Yeah, you know, the site plan review in this town is just, honestly, it's fabulous. And they all get together and they do a heck of a job trying to help the petitioner get through it. So any development is wonderful to see in this town. Our tax base going up is wonderful to see. So let's make this a usable property. Mr. Martin, any questions you want of our petitioner?
No, I'm pleased to see that, as was said, I was at site plan, and many of the suggestions have been taken into play here, and we appreciate that. And with that boundary between the employee parking and the actual buses being something that's going to shield the view more from White's Path, as well as maintaining all the existing trees that can be done and further planted if necessary in the front buffer along White's Path and along Commonwealth Ave, I think is great. And I don't have any problem, and because of the type of use of the site with big buses and their needs to park and get around and move around in there, that the in-law trees don't make a whole lot of sense in this case. One thing, and it didn't come up at site plan, and I'm not sure whether you might need relief on it, it came up with another property that's coming up that I noticed, is the buffer, the other 10-foot buffer between the other properties is supposed to be maintained as natural, again, with the existing trees being maintained. And I didn't really take note of it, but I think we're losing that with the retention pond on the south side and some of the other areas around that neck of the woods where the existing 10-foot buffer seems to be included in the retention thing. And I was wondering if trees can be planted in there as well, or there is any plan to do so, or whether you may need relief for that as well based on what I'm seeing here now. I should have seen before. I apologize for that.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. So in the letter from, I believe, your building department, in response to our kind of last round, we'll call it, of revisions, in item number 3, it says the plan set has been revised, and this is from your building inspector, the plan set has been revised since last submittal to show a planting buffer in accordance with 30144. I believe that's the buffer. I do see the area you're talking about. I think that might be an emergency overflow area where it might be a little bit lower, so
That's why,
have to check the other set.
Mr. Martin, that's why there's a little, it doesn't look like that area is extended, but that's the spillway that's described in the notes.
But my question is the existing 10 feet of trees there, does that stay or does that go in terms of having the retention? Because the retention area shows going essentially right up to the lot line. And it seems to me that if that is the case, then maybe trees should be planted there as well, if they can be. And again, I'm not sure just how that works, but
I'm going to just try to find the
bylaw
right
does
sheet.
say that those buffers are not supposed to, the existing trees are supposed to be left, and they're supposed to be buffers.
Well, let me just point out, we couldn't certainly even consider any relief on that if requested this evening.
That's true, because they didn't ask for it.
It's
Yeah,
not
right.
part of the petition relief or the advertised relief.
Well, that's right.
So that
I
a
think-
butter may have issues.
I think the city, I'm sorry, the town is the abutter there. They own the storm, it's the
The
storm.
town still has a right to have issues.
No, understood, yeah, it's a
I mean,
stormwater basin, yeah.
You know, we'd like to think that we're going to keep our town property okay, too, you know?
I mean, I don't really have any
Yeah, understood.
big issue with it, especially if you could plant in that area as well.
Yeah.
Or if it could be left natural as it should be as well, that's all the better. But, one of my concerns initially was that this is kind of an overuse of the site. There's an awful lot going on here. We got a lot of buses we're trying to fit in here, and then when the understandably conservation or health department, whatever, wants these retention ponds,
Yeah.
I can understand that as well. But then if we have to move those into what's supposed to be a maintained buffer, then I start to have some issues that I agree I should have had before.
So we can, so we're here, obviously here for the other requests this evening. I can certainly communicate with the building inspector tomorrow and see if that's something that needs to be applied for. My hunch is that we'll be able to supplement that with plantings as necessary. That would be our goal.
Well, I think, as Mr. Martin's pointing out, is that it needs to be maintained.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be maintained to the satisfaction of the building department, I'm sorry for speaking so softly, if it's going to be maintained to the satisfaction of the building department, we don't have to talk about it at all. But Mr. Martin is rightly pointing out something that you might want to consider.
Right.
Yeah, before it gets brought up to you, it
Absolutely.
might be an oversight to give this, but other than that, I think it looks fine.
All right,
Thank
so is
you.
anybody
Appreciate it.
prepared? Oh, by the way, for everybody at home, there is no correspondence on this, and we have received no exhibits this evening. Does anybody care to consider a motion at this point? Or would you like to have board discussion deliberate? By the way, and as well, there's nobody in our audience, so there's nobody speaking in favor or in
Davey
opposition.
had a question.
There was some correspondence, I guess.
Oh, there was? I apologize, I overlooked that, Sandy. Sure, it's right here.
Watching out for you.
Sure, it's right here. Well, it is the Board of, the Board of Health that has a memorandum, again, by Mr. Lawson, who is looking to, well, he's not even suggesting this as recommendations by us to be included. They're requiring you to do this already, right? This is just a memo of what the Board of Health, well, why don't we make this simple? Why don't we just include it as our requirements? Okay?
Yep.
And then we don't have to even consider. You're aware of the Board of Health suggestions?
I am. I pass that on to my client. They understand that. They have no problem with that.
Usually we have that before
Yeah.
they come for us, but, yeah, that's fine, that's a good idea.
Sure, let's just incorporate that as requirements. And then there's a Board of Health memo, Kelly Grant, Conservation Administrator, who indicates that on January 3, 19, the applicant filed an application with Conservation Commission for a stormwater management permit under the Town of Yarmouth Stormwater Bylaw, Chapter 145. Following review by Concom in the Engineering Department, a stormwater management permit was issued to the applicant on January 23, 2019. So we don't need to take any action on that, but I do apologize. Ms. Clark, thank you for keeping me on my toes, and as well, Mr. Martin, you passing it down. So, and perhaps any motion then should consider that the provisions of Carl Lawson's memorandum dated February 8, 2019, paragraphs 1 through 4 be made a condition of any grant of relief here this evening. Anybody prepared to make a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we approve the petition as requested with the following conditions. And on this, so you just want to put as a condition that they follow the recommendations of the Board of Health as,
Sure. Well, they're requirements of the Board of Health. They weren't recommendations
Right, the
in this
requirements
instance,
of the
but
Board of
we're
Health.
going to second them.
Yes.
Okay. And then
per
we-
their memorandum dated February 8th,
Yes,
2019.
yes. And then we also need to identify as a condition what kind of trees were,
And
evergreens
I
we're
would
asking.
suggest the, what, at Leland Cypress?
Yeah,
I would
on
say
the line,
that the,
in the area between the two parking lots.
in the area between the two parking lots, that they plant Leland cypress. 2, 4, 6, what'd you figure, 8? You figured 8, but enough to create a
A
natural
screen,
buffer.
a natural, to create a screen,
Right, so you might need more
visual
than 8.
screen.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I
if you
think it
need
would-
more than 8, you'll put more than 8 in?
I would think so. I would say a minimum of 10.
Probably.
So I'm going to say a natural fence, okay?
Yeah,
A natural
great.
fence slash
Create a natural
barrier.
fence, okay.
Natural fence, I guess is plenty. Okay, anybody prepared to second that motion made by Mr. Igo on
I'll
those two
second, Mr.
stated
Chairman.
conditions?
I'll second that motion.
I heard you, and thank you, Mr. Nicanello, as always.
Thank you.
So on that motion made by Mr. Igo, seconded by Mr. Nicanello, and on the stated conditions, does the board care to have any discussions before proceeding along to a vote?
Only that they've met the requirements under the bylaw for in-lot tree requirements, because they're going to put those trees in other areas
And increase the number, too.
and increase the number.
We're going to get more
So-
green for the buck.
So they're really mitigating things here, because they're taking from one area fewer trees than they had to plant and replacing them with more trees in another area.
Maybe a better statement would have been, we're going to get more green for the bus. Mr. Igo's motion, seconded by Mr. Nicanello. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
There are none opposed. That carries unanimously. The decision will be drafted. It will be filed with the town clerk's office. 20 days must elapse before that's considered final. Presuming there be no appeal, you would then record that grant a special permit at the Barnstable Registry of Deeds. Return proof of recordation back to our board secretary. Thank you very much for your patience and
Thank you, sir.
hard
Thank you,
work here.
board members. You run a nice meeting.
And with that, we move to adjourn, I bet?
Yes.
And we have moved, and so move, and we have adjourned.
There it is.
Happy Valentine's Day.